Oh, friend, as I wrap up these final thoughts for Exodus chapters 1 through 12, I have finished with the prayer saying, Lord, I have loved this time with you. I hope that you, like me, feel like you have gotten to know the Lord more and that you are enjoying him more, that you have experienced him with the Israelites throughout Exodus 1 through 12. That's why we're here. We are here to know and enjoy him. We didn't go through this study to be experts on these first 12 chapters of Exodus. We're not here so that we just, glean more Bible knowledge. We are here to know the Lord. And wow, he shines in these chapters. He absolutely shines. The Lord, the I am who I am. There's this being aspect to that. That is who he is. But there's also a doing aspect to that. When he speaks, it is so. When he says there is light, there is light. When he says he will set his people free, he will set his people free. And I don't know, for myself, friends, my heart feels transformed. My mind feels transformed at the end of this study. I just feel more rooted and grounded in faith. When circumstances don't make sense, can we trust God? Yes, yes, yes. He has shown himself faithful and trustworthy in these first 12 chapters of Exodus. Circling back to where we began in this study, we saw that God's people they are in Egypt. They are in Egypt, and Moses gives us that very short review of how they ended up in Egypt. But this doesn't make sense at all. Their circumstances do not make sense. What in the world are God's people doing in Egypt? And what in the world? They are slaves. They've been slaves probably more than 80 years, at least 2 generations of pharaohs. This does not make sense. Israelite baby boys are being tossed into the Nile. The horror, nothing makes sense. So in that, I think I talked about in the beginning that Moses kind of dangles this carrot out there. When circumstances don't make sense, can we trust in the Lord? He's asking that question. He's setting up this biblical narrative for us in that way. When circumstances don't make sense, can we trust the Lord? And that's what he's asking the Israelites. And that is so applicable to our lives today, because we look around us and circumstances absolutely are not making sense a lot of the times. Can we trust God through them? Choosing a favorite verse for this is very difficult, but my mind went back to some verses that root me and ground me in understanding that yes, we can trust the Lord. And so going all the way back to Exodus chapter 1:7, we see, but the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so that the land was filled with them. Friends, what in the world are the people doing in Egypt? God's people, why are they in Egypt? It doesn't make sense. But God was growing them into this great nation, which was faithful to his covenant promise to Abraham. He is doing his work. He is fulfilling his promise, even though this isn't how we would have written the story. This isn't how the Israelites would have written the story. No, this is God's story. He is the hero, and he knows what he's doing. So the people of Israel, they have grown, they have multiplied and they have grown strong in Egypt. But they are slaves. They are afflicted. They are oppressed. But we saw this about Yahweh. This is Exodus 2:24. And God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Oh, friends, that just kind of gets me emotional all over again. How often is it that we feel hopeless? God, do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you know me? Do you care? Oh, here is proof. Here is the proof. God heard their groaning. God remembers them. And this isn't that God had forgotten about him. No, not at all. Moses is just highlighting that God knows his covenant promise to his people. God sees his people, and God knows. He knows what they are going through. And then I wrapped up with the very last verse from this book. And on that very day, the Lord brought the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their hosts. By their hosts, so many. And he does this. Like, these 3 verses were so meaningful to me because they answer that question. When circumstances don't make sense, can we trust the Lord? And it's yes. Moses just lays this out. We can trust him. In Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 and 8, God explains to Moses what he is going to do, how he sees his people, and he is going to rescue them out of the land of Egypt. And doggone it, he does it, friends. He does it. Why? Because he is the Lord, which he explains to Moses later on in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. I am the Lord. Tell them I am who I am. Oh gosh, I'm getting that mixed up now. I am who I am. We'll leave it at that. So friends, when God speaks, it is so we can trust in his promises. We've learned so much about who the Lord is, but certainly we see his grace and his mercy, his slowness to anger, his steadfast love and faithfulness to the Israelite people. But did it, like it did for me, did it surprise you to see God's grace to the Egyptians and to Pharaoh? Yes, we have this hard line in this book. God hardens the heart of Pharaoh. But as we talked about, right alongside of that is Pharaoh hardening his own heart. Pharaoh started off with a hard heart. God knew it. God knew that his heart was hard. And how did God harden Pharaoh's heart? By these signs and these wonders. These signs and wonders really were intended to soften the heart. These signs and wonders are intended for Pharaoh and the Egyptians to see and acknowledge Yahweh as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And we see that the Egyptian people, their hearts, in the end here, they are acknowledging, they are fearful of Yahweh. Some of them are even putting their faith in Yahweh. They leave, they travel and journey with the Israelites. But for Pharaoh, he does not. He is stubborn. He refuses to listen. And we see God just being so direct with him. I mean, God is telling Pharaoh like it is. He gives Pharaoh, this is where I saw God's grace in an amazing way, is God giving Pharaoh opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, 10 times over again, to know him, to humble himself, to exalt the Lord instead of himself. But Pharaoh, doggone it, he is prideful, he is arrogant, he is self-centered, he is a narcissist of narcissists. He does not think of anyone but himself. He does not even think of his people. By his own evil choices, he brings calamity on those he is to lead. And if we go all the way back to the context and remember the role of the king of Egypt, his also has a spiritual role to intercede amongst the gods. Pharaoh's role was to lead the people to Yahweh, to God, and Pharaoh does not do that. As we see, due to his prideful arrogance. We can learn from Pharaoh. It's pretty scary what self-centeredness can look like, and just what a hard heart, how low it can sink and how hard it can become. That's a brief character analysis of Pharaoh. What about Moses? Friends, I see Moses. Now, this we have to kind of read in between the lines. Nowhere does it say Moses was a humble man. But don't we see his humility come out here? As the author of this narrative, he honestly and kind of bluntly shares his own faults, his own shortcomings. He didn't have to share that he had murdered an Egyptian. He didn't have to share that he had not circumcised his own son. He didn't have to share how he kind of objected to the Lord sending him to the Israelites, sending him to Pharaoh. He objected to this role that God had for him. He didn't have to share all that about himself, but he does. He really, in some ways, highlights his own shortcomings and how he himself was not trusting in the Lord. But yet, we definitely see him do trust in Yahweh. We see his faithfulness and his obedience to Yahweh time and time and time again. He has this hard job of going to Pharaoh and being God's prophet before Pharaoh to this man with a very hard heart who refuses to listen to God's words. Oh, Moses is humble. We see his faithful. I admire his faithfulness and his obedience to God here. Friends, how would you summarize this? The whole point of these 12 chapters is that the Lord brings the people of Israel up out of the land of Egypt. He rescues his people, and this in such a beautiful way fast forwards to the New Testament. I mean, don't we have the privilege of studying Exodus through the lens of the New Testament, through the lens of knowing Jesus Christ and understanding that Jesus Christ is the Passover lamb who spilt his blood on our behalf to rescue us from sin and death, as God rescued his people from their oppression, their affliction in the land of Egypt. I get goosebumps just speaking it. Friends, truly, I have loved this time of better knowing and understanding who our God is, experiencing him with the Israelites, and how he set his people free, how he turned the tables, how after 430 years, I mean, this must have seemed so hopeless that they would ever get out of the land of Egypt. Can we trust the Lord when circumstances don't make sense? Yes, yes, yes. I hope that your faith is more rooted and grounded. I hope that your heart and your mind is rooted and grounded in the Lord, in the I am who I am, in Yahweh. We can trust him.